My name is Logan Davis, and for most of my life, I thought I had finally escaped the orbit of my family. The endless cycle of giving, apologizing, and pretending I was part of something worth belonging to. I was 25, a self-made man with a startup built from caffeine, code, and sleepless nights. I had clawed my way out of a Denver basement and into a glass-walled office that actually carried my name on the door. I thought I was free, but that morning shattered the illusion. We were gathered at the breakfast table, sunlight sliding across the plates, pretending everything was normal. Then Caleb, my older brother, leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk. "Tomorrow we're moving into your house," he said casually, as if announcing the weather. Beside him, my sister Anna smiled, twirling her spoon like it was a crown. I waited for my parents to laugh, to tell them they were out of line. They didn't. My mother simply nodded, and my father muttered, "It's better this way." Better for who? I wanted to ask, but their eyes told me everything. This wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. For a moment, I almost laughed. The irony burned through me. I had spent years saving them, paying off their debts, carrying their chaos on my back. Now they wanted to move into the house I'd built with my own hands. The one symbol of my independence. I looked at each of them, calm on the outside, storming within. "All right," I said finally. "Just bring $280,000 first." The words sliced the room clean in half. Caleb's grin died mid-smile. Anna froze, spoon trembling. My parents' expressions hardened into disbelief. They didn't know that I'd already sold the house, cashed out my shares, and moved everything into a private trust under my name. They didn't know the safety net they counted on was gone. I sipped my coffee and watched their confusion settle in like fog. For the first time in years, the silence belonged to me. That moment wasn't about money. It was about freedom. The same family that once drained my savings was now staring at me like strangers, realizing I'd built walls they couldn't climb. But I wasn't celebrating. A part of me still remembered the boy who gave up his allowance for their emergencies, the teenager who worked summers to pay their bills. Now that same boy was being forced to choose between peace and blood. And as I walked away from that table, one thought echoed louder than their stunned silence. If family can break you once, they'll try again. Unless you end the cycle yourself. What turned the quiet boy they once ignored into the man who outplayed them all? Stay with me. The real betrayal hadn't even begun. I grew up in a small split-level home in Denver, Colorado. The kind of place where the walls remembered everything you weren't allowed to say out loud. My brother Caleb and sister Anna were the family's pride, glowing in the warm light of my parents' approval. I, on the other hand, was the invisible one. The kid you only remembered when someone needed a favor. Caleb got a brand new bike when he turned 10. Anna went on weekend ski trips to Aspen. And by 16, Caleb was gifted a red Mustang that roared down our quiet street like a victory parade. I got silence and old sneakers. When I asked why, my dad only said, "Be grateful, son. Family means sharing, sharing." That word felt like a lock on my ribs. At 12, I worked at Dairy Queen, scooping ice cream until my hands ached, stuffing crumpled dollar bills into a tin box under my bed. I wasn't saving for toys or clothes. I was saving for freedom. But in our house, freedom always came with a price. When my mom needed surgery and the hospital sent a mountain of bills, my dad looked straight at me and said, "Family comes first. Logan." He took all $600 I'd saved. Caleb laughed, said I'd get it back, and grabbed $200 more for a gaming console. Anna smiled sweetly and borrowed $300 for a trip to California. None of them ever paid me back. I didn't cry. I learned. At 13, when Caleb mocked me for demanding my money, I realized fairness didn't live in that house. My parents didn't see a son. They saw a resource. Every dollar I earned became proof that I was still under their control. So I started hiding what I made. In textbooks, behind loose floorboards, anywhere their hands couldn't reach. By high school, the pattern was set. Caleb bragged about his dealership job. Anna flaunted her college fund, and I worked nights, walking home under flickering streetlights, promising myself I'd escape. Every insult, every theft, every "you're too young to understand," fueled a quiet determination they couldn't see. I wasn't angry anymore. I was building something, a future they couldn't touch. When graduation came in 2018, my parents clapped for Caleb's speech, cheered Anna's honors, and barely noticed me collecting my diploma. But I didn't need their applause. My cap and gown weren't just a symbol. They were my exit ticket. That day, I swore one thing. I'd build a life so solid, they could never drain it again. They taught me the price of loyalty. But soon, they'd learn the cost of losing control, because the boy they ignored was about to build an empire they couldn't touch. Leaving home felt like walking out of a fog. For the first time in years, I could breathe without guilt clinging to my lungs. I enrolled in community college and worked 2 jobs to pay my tuition. Stocking shelves at King Soopers by night and filing papers at a small real estate office by day. My friends partied on weekends. I counted receipts and drank instant coffee. But compared to my past, that grind felt like freedom. In my finance class, I met Mary Garcia. Sharp, confident, the kind of person who never flinched when challenged. She noticed how I questioned everything, how I pushed for logic, even when it made others uncomfortable. "You think like someone who's already lost too much," she said once. I didn't answer. She was right. Then came Tyler Walker, the quiet coder who could turn any idea into a working prototype. The 3 of us were different pieces of the same puzzle. Ambition, precision, and belief. What started as a college project turned into an obsession. A fintech app that would make financial independence easier for small investors. I still remember those nights in the campus computer lab. Half-empty coffee cups, glowing screens, code errors that felt like puzzles, meant just for us. I taught myself Python and JavaScript through free tutorials, building until my laptop overheated. When people slept, I built. When others dreamed, I executed. By 2020, we had something real. A functioning app, clean UI, strong encryption, and a concept people understood. Control your money, control your life. A small Denver firm noticed and brought me on as a junior developer. At first, I fetched coffee and tested code, but within months, I was fixing bugs faster than the senior engineers. I didn't just want to be good. I wanted to be indispensable. Then, one Friday evening, the CEO called me in. "You've got the instinct," he said. "Let's see what you can do as lead developer." I walked out of that office numb, the title still echoing in my head. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was leading. By 23, our app had hit 6-figure revenue. Investors were calling. Local media dubbed us Denver's youngest disruptors. And for a brief shining moment, I thought the ghosts of my past were gone. But freedom has a way of calling its debt. Because the moment I rose, my family noticed. The same people who once ignored my struggle were about to appear at my door. Not to congratulate me, but to claim what they thought was still theirs. Success doesn't silence the past. It just makes the whispers louder. By 25, our startup office sat in downtown Denver. All glass walls and whiteboards filled with code. My team called me boss. But inside, I was still that kid counting dollar bills under a bed. When I invited my family to visit, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see the man I'd become. They arrived like a storm in designer clothes. Caleb scanned the office with greedy eyes. Anna filmed for her social media, and my parents smiled the way people do when they're already measuring what's yours. Over coffee, Caleb leaned in and asked casually, "So, what's your stake in this worth?" Anna giggled. "Yeah, Logan, you must be rolling in it." My mother's voice followed like a blade. "You've done well. It's time you helped the family again." I forced a smile, giving them the answer they deserved. "We're still growing." But I could feel their gaze drilling into me, calculating what they could take. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Uncle Matthew, the only honest one among them. His tone was low and hesitant. "Logan," he said, "your parents are buried in $40,000 of debt. They covered Caleb's apartment and Anna's vacation. They're planning to ask you for help." I thanked him and stared at the ceiling long after hanging up. The ache in my chest wasn't surprise. It was recognition. It never stopped. No matter how far I ran, they always found a way to drag me back with guilt. The next evening, I stayed late at the office, headphones in, pretending to work when I overheard voices through the conference room glass. Caleb and Anna. "If we move into Logan's house, we save rent," Caleb whispered. Anna laughed softly. "He won't say no. He never does." My parents' voices joined in. "Calm, certain. Logan's always been the responsible one. He'll understand." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a request. It was a plan. My home, my space, my peace. They were plotting to claim it like scavengers circling a carcass. I slipped out quietly, their voices echoing behind me, promising a repeat of every betrayal I thought I'd escaped. That night, sitting in the dark of my apartment, the decision crystallized. They weren't family anymore. They were a habit I needed to break. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I stopped at a name I'd been given months ago. Jacob Miller, attorney. The man people called when they wanted to disappear their assets without leaving a trace. What happens when the family who took everything learns there's nothing left to take? The answer would unfold in the one meeting that changed everything. I met Jacob Miller in a quiet corner office that smelled of leather and ink. The kind of place where people made decisions they couldn't undo. He was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who'd seen families tear each other apart over money 100 times before. "So, you're trying to protect yourself," he said, scanning the documents I handed him. "I'm trying to end a cycle," I replied. Jacob didn't ask questions. He just nodded, tapping his pen thoughtfully. Within a week, he had everything lined up. A valuation of my startup shares at $280,000. A sale contract transferring them into a private investment fund under a shell entity only I controlled. It was clean, legal, and invisible. Signing those papers felt like cutting the last thread that tied me to them. When the ink dried, I exhaled for the first time in months. I walked out of Jacob's office lighter, the Denver skyline glittering like a promise of peace I'd earned. That night, I met Mary and Tyler at our favorite diner, the same place where we'd once sketched dreams on napkins. I told them everything about my family's plans, the sale, my decision to finally draw a line. Mary leaned forward, her voice steady but full of fire. "You did what you had to do, Logan. They've taken enough." Then she smiled faintly, sadness flickering in her eyes. "You remember freshman year, when your mom called, and you sent her your rent money just to stop her from crying? You've been saving them since you were a kid. It's about time you saved yourself." Her words hit harder than I expected. I didn't respond, just nodded, tracing the rim of my coffee cup, watching the steam twist upward, like memories I was finally ready to release. Tyler spoke next, his tone low and deliberate. "You earned this life. Don't let them touch it again." That night, I walked home through the quiet Denver streets, their words replaying in my mind. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the architect of my own freedom. Back at work, we dove into a new project led by Patricia Hernandez, a strategist with a bold idea, a micro-investment app for small businesses. Her pitch was electric, her data airtight. I saw in her the same hunger I'd once had, and it reminded me why I started. Every late-night meeting, every line of code, every breakthrough became another brick in the wall, separating me from the past. I wasn't just protecting my money anymore. I was protecting my peace. But peace never lasts when greed still breathes. The morning they came to claim my house, that's when the real test began. The morning felt deceptively calm. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, cutting sharp lines across the table where my family sat. As if even the light knew where not to touch, Caleb leaned back in his chair, that smug grin stretching across his face, like he was about to make an announcement the world had been waiting for. "We're moving into your house," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes glinting with victory. "No excuses this time, Logan." Anna chimed in, tapping her fork against her plate. "It's big enough for all of us. You'll barely notice we're there." Across from me, my parents sat with expressions of calm certainty, as if this was already decided. Another one of their family arrangements I was expected to obey. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken entitlement. I didn't flinch. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch until their confidence began to crack. Then I looked up and said evenly, "You can move in, if you can bring $280,000. The words hung there like a verdict. Caleb's smirk faltered, his hand tightening around his mug. Anna blinked rapidly, color draining from her face. My father's jaw locked, and my mother's smile turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "I sold it," I replied simply. "The house isn't mine anymore." For a full second, no one breathed. Then the room exploded. "You did what?" My father thundered, slamming his palm against the table. "You're selfish, Logan. After everything we've done for you." My mother's voice cut in, trembling with fury. "We'll tell everyone in Denver what kind of son you are." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "You betrayed us," she sobbed, pressing her hands to her face like I'd just burned her childhood home. Caleb jumped in next, his voice cracking. "You think you're better than us? Hiding behind your money." Their noise filled the room, but none of it touched me. I had lived this scene too many times. The guilt, the blame, the manipulation disguised as love. Not this time. I set my cup down, looked each of them in the eye, and said calmly, "You saw my life as something you could take. I spent years paying for your mistakes. That ends today." The room fell silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. Mary, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand beneath the table. Uncle Matthew, at the far end, gave me the smallest nod. Quiet approval. The only one I needed. I stood, pushed my chair back, and said the words I'd rehearsed for years, but never dared to speak. "You don't get to decide my life anymore." Their silence that morning wasn't the end. It was the beginning of their downfall, because when they tried to destroy my name, they forgot I'd already built something they could never touch. The weeks after that breakfast felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm. Quiet, but dangerous. My phone lit up with messages from Denver, screenshots of posts, gossip, twisted stories. Caleb and Anna had turned social media into their battlefield, painting me as the villain who'd abandoned his family. Their captions dripped with venom. "Money changes people." "He forgot who raised him." At first, their words stung. Then I realized they weren't telling my story. They were telling the story they needed to believe, that I was still responsible for their misery. But the truth was simpler. I'd stopped carrying them, and they didn't know how to walk on their own. Then came the day they crossed a line. My parents stormed into my office unannounced, faces flushed, voices echoing off the glass walls. My father pointed at me in front of my team. "You owe us, Logan," he shouted. "We deserve our share." My mother's voice cracked with rage. "After all the sacrifices we made for you, this is how you repay us." Every eye in the office turned toward me. For a second, the boy in me wanted to shrink, to apologize. But that boy was gone. I stood straight, calm, and said quietly, "Security will escort you out." The guards came. My parents screamed about betrayal, their words echoing down the hall as they were led away. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Patricia Hernandez, our strategist, gave me a small nod, respect flickering in her eyes. "About time," she said simply. That night, I blocked every number tied to my past. My parents, Caleb, Anna. The next morning, my phone was silent for the first time in years. That silence was peace. I poured my focus into Patricia's project, the micro-investment app. We pushed through sleepless nights, debugging, designing, refining. When Denver First Bank signed a partnership deal, it felt like destiny sealing my independence. Every milestone became proof that my success no longer had to be shared, justified, or explained. Meanwhile, word reached me. Caleb had lost his job. Anna's luxury life collapsed into barista shifts. My parents sold the old house and moved into a one-bedroom rental. I didn't smile when I heard it. I just felt closure. Months later, I stood in a small Denver park, the mountains framing the horizon as I married Mary Garcia, under string lights and autumn skies, surrounded by chosen friends. I realized I'd built something stronger than revenge. Freedom. As we danced, I thought of the boy who'd once hidden crumpled bills in a tin box, and the man who'd finally learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're protection. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped letting them destroy me. Sometimes, the loudest revenge isn't anger or success. It's silence. Because when you finally stop explaining yourself, that's when you've truly won your freedom.